you idiot! Hang on,
Facing the relentless fury of nature, the crews of fishing vessels battle against towering waves and stormy seas, risking their lives for the sake of their catch. Their job is anything but safe, with each journey fraught with dangerous challenges. For almost 2 decades, the reality TV series Deadliest Catch has showcased the dangers of crab fishing, portraying the events that unfold in the unforgiving waters, far from the safety of civilization. Join us as we explore some of the most intense weather moments captured on Deadliest Catch, highlighting the bravery and resilience of these fishermen in the face of nature's wrath. The clash of boats. Since it first made its debut on the Discovery Channel in 2005, Deadliest Catch has been one of the network's most popular reality TV shows. The series covers the incredibly tough and dangerous life on board crab fishing vessels, showing how some of the most popular seafood in the world is taken from the ocean to the dinner table. The action takes place primarily in the Bering Sea in the northern Pacific Ocean, where the waters are fierce and the weather can quickly turn deadly. Something was apparent here, as a storm threatened to tear everything down to the sea. Even though the Bering Sea is massive, most crab fishing vessels find themselves alone for the most part when out fishing. Occasionally, ships will see rival fishermen or other vessels in the same area, but that's definitely not the norm. That made the Deadliest Catch collision during the episode Russian Dragger especially distressing and alarming when it occurred. Keith Colburn's ship, the Wizard, is steaming through the sea, but the storm had other things on its mind when suddenly another boat cut in front of them. With the weather not clear enough, Colburn was unable to stop the Wizard or maneuver out of the way. He started screaming frantically over the radio at the other ship to move.
I can't stop you, idiot! Hang on, head, you moron!
But to no avail. The Wizard plowed into the other boat at almost full steam, risking the lives of the crews on both ships. The Wizard's anchor is completely crumpled and smashed from the impact, and Colburn and the crew are worried the ship might have structural damage too. For a few brief moments, the Wizard stands paralyzed in the sea, unable to move out of fear of causing even more damage. Fortunately, the crew determined that the ship was okay structurally, and the impact was largely absorbed by the anchor. Both ships sail away from the incident in the end, but things could have turned out much worse. Thankfully, it didn't. That almost gave me a heart attack, but you could only wish that was the end of it. But no. So what other near-miss moments are there on the show? Let's take you aboard and afloat the vast sea. Rough waters nearly took out the Summer Bay. Sometimes, the hardest part about crab fishing isn't catching the actual crustaceans themselves. The incredibly rough waters of the Bering Sea make everything challenging, and in some cases, that even extends to the harbors of the canneries the crabbers deliver their product to. During the Deadliest Catch Season 17 episode, The Ultimate Price, Captain Wild Bill Wachowski and his crew on the Summer Bay have to deal with one of the worst harbors in the entire sea. It is near the end of the season, and the cannery is one of the few still open, but it is notorious for having an incredibly dangerous harbor. The waves are known for being big and gnarly, and this time, they just about took Summer Bay to the bottom of the sea. Wachowski is trying to maneuver the Summer Bay into port, but he gets caught in the surf zone and the massive swells keep turning his boat around. There are huge waves crashing on the deck, prompting Wachowski to call his crew inside. At multiple points, the Summer Bay is almost completely submerged underwater, and one superwave just about flips the vessel upside down. The ship is almost completely sideways, and water even pours into the cockpit. Wachowski remarks that it was one of the closest calls of his career, and even the camera crew starts profusely thanking him for saving their lives with his excellent piloting skills. It was a harrowing ending to a season that had already seen tragedy strike the crew of the Summer Bay. The ship's deck boss, Nick McGlashan, died in December 2020 at the age of 33. Having to face the harsh weather conditions on the sea is very challenging, but sometimes these moments lead to emergencies. How does the crew handle these moments? Coast Guard stayed on the watch for Patricia Lee. When you have to get the Coast Guard involved for an at-sea rescue, it's almost never a good sign. Yet it happens more often than you might think, especially if you are a Deadliest Catch crew member. Unfortunately, in the episode Crushed at Sea, the crew of Patricia Lee finds themselves facing a situation that requires a medevac. While crabbing during a severe storm, deckhand Francis Katungen gets himself crushed between two massive crab pots. The impact severely injures him, hurting his back and putting him in immense pain. Worse yet, the Patricia Lee is very far at sea and out of the Coast Guard's 100-mile rescue zone. To save Katungen's life, Captain Rip Carlton has to race through an extreme storm to get to the outer edge of the rescue zone so the Coast Guard can pick him up. Once the medevac team safely makes it aboard, they then have to deal with the delicate issue of Katungen's back, which they cannot risk abruptly moving. When he's finally secured, the Coast Guard is able to lift Katungen off the Patricia Lee in the middle of a terrible storm. Reportedly, Katungen survived his injuries, though his career as a crabber might be over. Sometimes the crew saves themselves, but how do you save the boat from being torn apart by a 115-meter-per-hour hurricane wind? The chaos in the middle of the sea. In this episode, the hurricane force winds. The crew of the crab fishing vessel Northwestern faced incredibly intense winds that reached hurricane force, making it one of the most challenging fishing trips of their lives. With fear and trepidation gripping them, they wonder if they should start saying their last prayers. If it were me and I survived this, I'd never get anywhere near the sea, not even a swimming pool. But this crew channeled their inner superhero by staying strong. The winds, which exceed 100 knots, which is equivalent to 115 meters per hour, caused massive waves to crash against the ship, putting the crew's skills and the vessel's durability to the test. The crew battled to keep their ship afloat, struggling to maintain control as the winds and waves threatened to capsize the boat. The crew's heroic efforts to secure the ship's gear, tie down loose items on deck, and navigate through the treacherous waters. The camera captured the intensity of the moment, with the crew clinging to the ship's railings, their faces set against the driving wind and rain. The episode is a heart-pumping example of the dangers faced by fishermen in the Bering Sea. What if you're not just losing your wit to the exhausting storm and mishaps on the sea? What if you lose a limb or two, losing a fraction of his hand to the bait chopper? One of the dangers of fishing in the Bering Sea is the complete isolation, as you're miles away from anywhere, at least if you're looking to make the best catches. As Deadliest Catch highlights so well, crab fishing vessels have to travel to remote parts of the ocean in order to catch the most crab. While this allows them access to some of the freshest and best tasting seafood, it also leaves them totally cut off from things like hospitals and doctors, sometimes by hundreds of miles. While crews will typically have at least one medically certified individual on board, that's not always enough, as they are still pretty limited in what they can do. This is perfectly illustrated during this episode, The Final Battle, when deckhand Brandon Jamie gets several of his fingers caught in a bait chopper while at sea. With Jaime bleeding profusely and no medical facilities on the ship, the captain calls in the Coast Guard for an airlift rescue. However, the weather is so poor at first that it prevents the Coast Guard from flying to sea to rescue the injured crewmen. They had to wait until a break in the storm to finally get Jaime off the boat, which involved the Coast Guard pulling him up with a metal basket. After the rescue, Jamie was taken to the closest hospital, where he was briefly treated before flying to the mainland to see a specialist. It is definitely one of the most tense moments on Deadliest Catch, and also one of the most gruesome. Imagine the pain, the amount of blood lost, and the panic that would have joined the crew on board. Chilling. Losing a limb is scary, no doubt. How about the ship losing its power? With the ship plunged into darkness, unable to radio anyone to call for help, and stationed at a spot while enduring the bashful and unforgiving waves, what do you think would happen? All power belonged to the sea. Imagine for a moment that you find yourself crab fishing in the middle of the Bering Sea. It's late at night, the temperatures are sub-zero, and you're sailing your way through a storm trying to catch some crab. Out of nowhere, the lights start flickering, and suddenly, you lose all power. Immediately, you and the ship are plunged into darkness, and chaos reigns. To make things worse, a fire breaks out in the engine room, and your electrical system gets completely fried. There was no power, and all were at the mercy of the unforgiving sea waves. That's the situation Deadliest Catch. Captain Sig Hansen and his crew on the Northwestern find themselves in during this episode, Fire at Sea. The fire occurs as the crew is in the middle of hauling in pots full of crab, and it brings the entire operation to a standstill. After the crew puts the fire out, they realize the electrical system is severely damaged. which puts the thousands of pounds of crab they have already caught at risk. The crab will die without access to fresh water, and the pumps on the Northwestern are controlled electronically. The crew is nearly 200 miles away from any land when the incident happens, which could have been fatal. Luckily, they are able to fix the ship and get their 4-cylinder engine working, saving the day, and the crab, and getting the Northwestern home safely. What if your equipment leaves you hanging on the sea? Fishermen, trapped on the Wizard. In order for the crab fishermen on Deadliest Catch to do their jobs, they have to utilize a lot of hydraulic and mechanized equipment. After all, most crews only consist of 4 deckhands, and they have to catch, sort, and store thousands of pounds of crab each trip. This task would be virtually impossible to do effectively by hand, necessitating the use of heavy machinery at nearly every turn. Most of the time, things go smoothly, and the equipment helps the crabbers accomplish their job much more easily. But that's not always the case. During this episode, Blonde Ambition, deckhand Roger Schlossstein from the Wizard finds himself crushed by a piece of equipment. While Schlossstein is unloading crab from a full pot, the hydraulic table behind him moves forward, trapping Schlossstein between the pot and the table. That must have really hurt. Immediately, Schlossstein starts screaming in agony, and he collapses to the deck as soon as the table moves back. His back injury looks so severe that Captain Keith Colburn comes down from the cockpit to check on him. Without access to a hospital, Schlossstein is forced to get by with only rudimentary pain medications. It is seriously a distressing moment, and one that really shows how dangerous crabbing is. Things are getting smashed on board by the waves and equipment. But do you really think that's the only peril voyaging on the sea? The new guy got a harsh introduction. Being a greenhorn on Deadliest Catch is truly an experience. The term greenhorn is meant to denote rookie deckhands who are in their first season of crab fishing. Greenhorns can be young or old, and they can be subjected to some pretty severe ridicule at times from veteran crabbers who have been in the industry for years or even decades. In addition to the torment, greenhorns also have to learn the ropes of crab fishing very quickly in what is the true definition of on-the-job training. During this episode, Skipper Harris in training, Cape Caution greenhorn Miles Johnson learned just how dangerous life at sea can be. While he was hauling in full crab pots at night, one of them took an unexpected jolt and smashed directly into his face. The impact knocked Johnson over, and his face was quickly rendered a bloody mess. Luckily, one of the other crew members was a registered EMT, and he was able to dispense some quick care to stop the bleeding. Wow, imagine getting smashed in the face by a crab. That's one heck of an introduction to an already harsh world. However, Captain Wild, Bill Wachowski, was still incredibly worried about the possibility of a concussion, and he and the crew had to monitor Johnson throughout the night. The incident ended Johnson's season on Cape Caution, but at least he survived with only a broken nose. But imagine being thrown by a massive wave into the sea. That sure beats crab attack, don't you think? Thrown overboard, the Summer Bay. Of all the things that could possibly go wrong on Deadliest Catch, going overboard is definitely near the top of the list. Not only is there the risk of getting crushed by the boat, but drowning, getting attacked by animals, and succumbing to hypothermia are all significant possibilities. That nearly happened to Greenhorn Spencer Moore on the Summer Bay during the appropriately titled episode, Greenhorn Overboard. Moore and the crew were working before a sudden wave swept him off the boat. The crew immediately reacted, shouting "Man overboard," to alert Captain Wild, Bill Wachowski, of what was going on as they grabbed the life preserver ring and threw it to Moore in the ocean. Miraculously, the crew was able to pull Moore on board and save his life, but he spent several moments in the freezing waters as they struggled to pull him up. After getting him on the deck, Moore lay motionless for several moments, but eventually, he was able to stand up before he made his way inside. He profusely thanked his shipmates for saving his life, and he seemed to be physically okay. It's hard to imagine just how terrifying a moment like that would have been, and Moore was incredibly lucky his crewmates were able to act so quickly and efficiently, or else this could have been a much more tragic story. What a relief. The sea has never had a place for even the seasoned deckhands and captains, but how kind could it be to a greenhorn captain? The rough voyage for the rookie. When Jake Anderson took over from Elliot Neese as the captain of the saga, things didn't quite get off to the best start. During his first voyage in charge in the episode 5-Year Storm, The saga ran into some rough weather that produced violent waves as big as 40 feet tall. At a particularly intense moment, two massive waves crashed over the deck, one right after another, plunging the deck underwater for a brief moment and sending the deck crew swimming. Multiple deckhands were unexpectedly smashed in the face by powerful waves, and the pilot was terrified as he watched the water carry them around the deck. One must wonder what must be going through his greenhorn mind. The crew members could have easily slid into a piece of heavy equipment and been severely injured, or they could have been swept right off the deck into the freezing ocean. The saga itself nearly capsized from the impact of the waves, potentially putting the entire crew in a deadly situation. Luckily, the pilot is able to gain control of the vessel before anyone gets hurt, but the crew is more than a little upset over what happened. Deckhand Nick Sunshine Tokman confronted Relief Captain Ray Flerchiner over the incident, but the captain claimed the waves were rogue, and he had no way to avoid them or warn the crew. In the end, no one was seriously injured physically, but everyone was pretty shaken emotionally. It was a less than auspicious start for Anderson's captain career, and definitely a learning experience for everyone. Emergencies are never a good thing, especially when you're miles away from any aid. What happens in a situation like this? The sea left, the crew hungry and thirsty. Having a medical emergency while trapped at sea is one of the most terrifying experiences one could go through. There are very few, if any, fully trained medical personnel on board, and any actual medical facility is sometimes hundreds of miles away on dry land. Things can go from bad to worse very quickly, and in Greenhorn, Chris Scambler's case during this Deadliest Catch episode, vital signs, they unfortunately do. Scambler was a deckhand on the Wizard that season, and during the episode, he experienced a horrifying bout of dehydration. His body started to completely shut down, and his heart rate was skyrocketing while his blood pressure was simultaneously dropping, which was never a good sign. Scambler walked off the deck and collapsed as his vision became impaired. Captain Keith Colburn's quick thinking led to a dramatic mid-sea rescue by the Coast Guard, who in all likelihood saved Scambler's life. Colburn and the entire crew were pretty rattled by the incident, and Scambler was unable to continue for the remainder of the season. It is a serious reminder about how dangerous and fleeting life can be in the Bering Sea, and definitely one of the show's most intense moments. To assume it only ends with a horrifying dehydration moment that left Scambler scrambling for his life would be to underestimate what could go wrong far off the coast. What else happened? Stay tuned. Captain Hansen, shocking heart attack. For many crab fishermen, the season does not end until they can finally return to their homes and get a good night's sleep in their own beds. And as Deadliest Catch star Sig Hansen showed in this episode, the Widowmaker, even heading back to port, can be deadly. During the finale, Hansen and the Northwestern were heading back to end their season when Hansen started experiencing serious chest and arm pains. He was unsure of exactly what was going on, and even said he wasn't dying after the camera crew started to notice he was experiencing discomfort. Yet, as it turned out, Hansen was experiencing a potentially fatal heart attack. He was immediately rushed to the hospital when the Northwestern made it to port, where his doctor revealed the terrifying truth. Hansen did not experience just any heart attack, but one of the most life-threatening possible, a Widowmaker. The Widowmaker is so called because of its potential to become fatal extremely quickly, as 50% of the heart's blood supply is immediately compromised. Hansen was incredibly lucky that his heart attack happened at the end of the season when he was headed to port, or things could have turned out much worse. He looked to be in obvious pain during the interview, and the doctor made it clear how close he came to dying. Talk about heading home for a good night's sleep. Who else has fallen into the sea? Were they saved? Time Bandit steals the day. As Deadliest Catch Captain Jonathan Hillstrand shows, one of the most important tasks of any ship captain sailing through the Bering Sea is to be attentive and alert. During this episode, Cheating Death, Hillstrand and his vessel Time Bandit were steaming through the sea when he noticed a fellow fishing vessel. There was a pretty good storm raging, and Hillstrand saw that one of the deckhands, Josh White, was in a very precarious situation on the side of the ship trying to secure the crab pots. After seeing the ship rock back and forth with White near the edge, Hillstrand lost track of him and realized that White had fallen into the sea. Immediately, Hillstrand alerted his crew, and they were able to pull the drowning White out of the ocean. After he was rescued, White suffered from the early stages of hypothermia when they picked him up, so the crew immediately replaced his soaking wet clothes with a warm and dry blanket. White was incredibly relieved at being saved, and he started thanking and hugging Hillstrand as soon as he saw him. Though it came early in the series, this is truly one of the show's defining moments. It showcased the danger and peril these commercial fishermen experience on a daily basis, and luckily, it finished with a happy ending. The sea always wants to have you, but what happens when the unforgiving waves pitch the ships against each other? The southern wind and Summer Bay collided due to strong winds. During this episode of Deadliest Catch, the southern wind was blown off course while attempting to dock at St. Paul's Harbor, Alaska, due to the 50-knot wind speeds present within the harbor. The wind shifted the boat and sent it barreling towards Summer Bay, which was already docked. At the time, Summer Bay was captained by Deadliest Catch, regular Wild Bill Wachowski. Despite the best efforts of the Southern Wind's captain, Steve Harley Davidson, the boat's momentum carried it straight into Summer Bay, and the two ships collided with a massive crash. The collision left both ships with dents and scrapes. Because this occurred when both ships were almost completely stationary, the damage was extremely minimal, though a harder crash could easily have caused catastrophic damage to either ship. Perhaps the most absurd part of this collision is the fact that clearly neither captain was prepared for it, as Wild Bill and Harley both allowed the ships to crash without having their crews prepare a crash bag to soften the blow. Whether or not you blame the weather or the poor maneuvering of the ship's captains, the fact remains that such a collision, however small, could have meant disaster for both the Southern Wind and the Summer Bay if the wind had been just a bit worse. Luck is pretty hard to come by on Deadliest Catch, but it was surely with them that day. But sometimes, when the sea becomes a little bit harsher, what do you really do? The ice storm. This episode of the Deadliest Catch show was a thrilling and literally chilling episode that showcased the harsh conditions faced by fishermen in the Bering Sea. The episode, which aired in 2007, features the crew of the crab fishing vessel Time Bandit as they navigate through treacherous, icy waters. The icy conditions are so severe that the crew struggles to keep their boat afloat, and the camera crew captures the intense moments as they battle to stay safe. The episode provided a glimpse into the challenges faced by fishermen who ventured too far into the unforgiving Bering Sea. When the icy water doesn't deter you, what else do you think the sea can send in the way of these crews? The Merciless Wave. This episode of the Deadliest Catch show is a heart-stopping episode that showcases the unpredictability of the Bering Sea. In this episode, the crew of the crab fishing vessel Wizard faced an unexpected and massive rogue wave that hit their ship with tremendous force. The wave, which is much larger and more powerful than the usual waves in the area, caught the crew off guard and caused significant damage to the vessel. The crew was thrown off balance, and the ship's equipment was severely damaged, leaving them struggling to recover from the surprise attack. The crew desperately attempted to regain control of the ship and assess the damage. The intensity of the moment, with water flooding the deck and the crew fighting to keep their boat afloat, was obvious. The episode is a testament to the bravery and resilience of the fishermen who venture into the treacherous waters of the Bering Sea. The series follows a fisherman's life on the Bering Sea aboard various crab fishing boats during two of the crab fishing seasons, the October King crab season and the January Opilio crab season. The show emphasizes the dangers on deck to the fishermen and camera crews as they duck heavy crab pots swinging into position, maneuver hundreds of pounds of crab across a deck strewn with hazards, and lean over the rails to position pots for launch or retrieval, while gale force winds and high waves lash the deck constantly. What is your take on these harrowing moments and the unforgiven sea waves? Share your views with us in the comments section. Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.